Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Paranormal the New Normal. I'm your host, Jeremy, as always, trying to make the world seem a little more normal. Does it ever happen? Oh, God, no. Who are we fucking kidding at this point after 200 episodes? The world's not normal, never will be. Get used to it. But, as always, my quest continues. I'm an honor man like that. I gotta keep going. My guest on this quest tonight, though, is Kat Gillett, psychic, astral traveler, and so much more. But we're gonna get into all that in a little bit, folks. How you doing tonight, Kat?
I'm doing great. I appreciate being here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure, my pleasure. Once I saw your profile, I was like, oh, I gotta talk to her. That sounds like a fun conversation right there. But let me start off the same way I start off every interview, though. What brought you down this path into the paranormal spiritual world?
Oh God. My my paranormal slash spiritual experiences started when I was a kid. I was 12 years old when I went to the public library and checked out a book that was called The Art of Soul Travel. And I'm not sure why I thought it was a cool idea as a 12-year-old to take up the practice of meditation and trying to get out of my body, but I think to me, at least initially, it seemed like a cool experiment almost. I was raised in an agnostic family. It's all very science oriented. If you can't put it in a test tube and shake it around in front of me, then it isn't real, kind of a vibe. And so I think initially it just seemed like an interesting experiment, to try getting out of my body. So I started a meditation practice. I followed the instructions that were laid out in the book, which were, nowadays you can find those same practices anywhere. It's all very basic meditation stuff, but I think the results were interesting enough to me to continue practicing it. I could, quiet my mind and not think anything, which, nobody had ever brought up to me before was a thing that could be done or we should try doing. I could feel the energy. I could feel like the tingling moving around my body. I could move it around myself. And so the results, I think, initially were just interesting enough for me to keep going with it. And then, I don't know, maybe 3 months into it or so, I got my first like knowing, like, and I think nowadays they call it getting a download, but if I'm willing to date myself here, like we weren't actually downloading anything in those days, like that wasn't a thing yet. So I always just called it getting the knowing, but it's when you get like a complete block of information just like enters into your brain without any kind of linear words or thought processes attached to it. But as I straightened out the thought for myself, it was something along the lines of you're not really in to begin with. Like the body isn't a jam jar, you're not stuck inside of it. And the concept that went along with that, at the time for myself was like a radio station. Like your body, physical reality is like a station that you're tuned to experiencing, but there's all different broadcasts happening all of the time. It's all simultaneously being broadcast. And if you know how to operate the knob, you can change the station to experience something else. And well, I thought that was weird. I didn't think much of it until I had been laying on the couch one afternoon reading a book and went to shift my body position and fell on the floor, or at least that's what I thought had happened until I stood up and turned around and looked and saw my body was still laying right on the couch exactly where it had been.
Ooh, that's that would be so creepy to have that happen, and especially when you don't expect it to happen, and you just turn around and see your body laying there. Out of body experiences like that always. I never had one, and it always kind of freaks me out if I ever will. Like it would freak me out to know, and
Yeah,
I mean,
it's certainly an uncomfortable and weird experience at first and takes some getting used to, and especially like for me at least it would happen sporadically. Like I didn't have any control over it. It would just happen whenever it felt like happening, and so it was almost always like a shock when it happened at first, and I couldn't get very far away from my body before I would be snapped back into it just because the feeling of it was so weird. But I certainly, like in my adolescent brain, I thought that was cool. I was like, if this is real, I wonder what else is real, right? And so it was back to the library for me, and I checked out a book on ancient Gaelic rites this time. And for whatever reason, I thought it would be cool to for my first foray into rituals to try summoning fairies because I was really thinking
Ooh.
Tinkerbell. Yeah, right. Uh, and I went through and did the whole practice that was outlined in there, and I gathered up all of my energy because I knew how to do that from meditation and did the whole thing, spoke all of the words, and I remember being very disappointed because it was like nothing happened. You know, Tinkerbell didn't show up for tea time. There was no effect happening, so I was like, whatever, this is. I just kind of left it like, okay, well, this was disappointing until that night, or it might have been the night after. I'm not entirely sure, but I was doing my nightly meditation practice and ended up flung out of my body, like forcefully, like all the way across the room. And when I stood up and turned around and looked, my body was still laying on the bed, but hovering over it was this large black like form, like humanoid sort of form that was a presence in the room hovering over my body. And I was terrified. Like
I
I
I can
feel
imagine.
like I tried to flee, but I was in an astral state, so it was like moving through molasses, like the panic wasn't helping the situation, so I would end up back in my body, only to end up flung right back out of my body, only to try and flee and end up back in it. And this would happen 5, 6 times a night for weeks, for months on end.
Well,
And
bef- before I ask the question I'm sure everybody wants me to ask, before I forget, I do gotta say, you are a bit of a unique case for this show. It's not often we get people who weren't brought up in religious households. So
yeah,
that's usually like
and
a prerequisite for this world, is that being brought up in a strict religious household.
there's a lot of that, and part of the reason I like to share my story and spread knowledge about this is because a lot of people's stories and journeys are about coming out of a strict religious upbringing, and for me, coming out of a different kind of scenario, I had a couple of things going for me. The first was that I didn't immediately interpret things as demons or as evil or as angels. Like I was a little bit more open-minded about what it was I was dealing with. Um, so I didn't necessarily jump to something is evil and trying to steal my soul or trying to steal my body. It just wasn't the natural conclusion from my point of view. Um, and also I kind of have the experience of sort of escaping from the opposite, the scientific dogma, right? Because
Exactly.
for me, the fear was always there's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with my brain. I'm schizophrenic, or I was always afraid that I was some kind of crazy, and that there was something damaged or wrong with me. So both sides, both the religious aspect and the strictly skeptical scientific aspect, have some shortcomings coming trying to find the middle ground in a more spiritual way or a more balanced way of interpreting when these things happen. Um, Definitely, it took me a while before I went and confessed to my mom. I finally got frustrated with the presence in my room to the point where I remember shouting at it, "What are you? What is it that you want? Why are you here?"
That was gonna be
And
that was gonna be my next question. Is, did you ever figure out what it is that was pushing out of your body?
yeah, and it said its name,
Ooh,
which
creepy.
yeah, which I won't repeat here. And it said, "You were mine." And that's when I panicked and went and confessed to my mom. And it
So,
mhm.
was it an interdimensional being, or was it a shadow person, or
you know, over the years I've dealt with, because long story short is the situation never went away, and a door once opened can be passed through in both directions. So once I was used to dealing with an entity in my room and sensing that energy and that personality in my presence, my dreams also started to change. So for me, stepping into lucid dreaming, I actually, my trigger for a lucid state was recognizing when there was an actual other personality construct in my vicinity. So something that wasn't like the rest of the characters in your dreams, something that actually had a real personality signature there. And I remember, at least initially at first, I would look at it and be like, "You're not my friend. Like, who are you? Who the hell are you?" And they were always surprised to be recognized. Like, "Oh, you're right, I'm not, but maybe we should wake you up now." Or I had one of them one time that was sitting next to me and I was like, "Who are you?" And it was like, "Oh, you can see me? Well, good for you. You know, they look for people like you." And I was like, "They who?" You
This
know?
is this is awesome. This is like something out of a freaking book almost. Like it's almost like something out of a book. Like it's like some Harry Potter type storyline.
It's weird and and you can see why. Like, for a long time I thought maybe I'm crazy, and I was in the closet about all of this stuff for almost 30 years. I just went about my life. I didn't talk about it. I mean, how do you bring this up at the watering hole? You know, it's one of it's one of those things that I just sort of, even though I was consistently experiencing these things, I never really talked about with anyone else. I had tried various spiritual, circles, just, but because of the way I interpret the situation, I was always the nail that stuck up that got hammered down. Um, People were always very quick to diagnose me in one way or another and offer some kind of solution rather than actually listening to what I was saying. So I would get a lot of things like, "Oh, you have a spirit attached to you." But I knew that even if that was the case, that there was something else going on, because the original shadow being wasn't the only one. Like, once there was that there, it was like other shadow beings were attracted to the situation. And I would end up tangling with a whole bunch of different ones, some of them more nasty than others. And for a long
Like
time that Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I mean, it makes sense. There's not one of anything in this universe. I'm not even gonna say this world, this universe. There's not one of anything. So, 100%
Mhm.
makes sense. But please continue this amazing dialogue story. I'm dying to hear it. I really am.
Well, kind of simultaneously as that situation was escalating, and over the years I got, uh you go through the fear of it all, and then you get angry. You kind of go through of phases of acceptance, I guess. There's the fear and the helplessness, and then the anger and the fighting back, and you almost at some point get to a place of apathy where it's like none of that anymore. It's just like, what are we doing here? Like, how long are we going to do this? What do you want? You know, that kind of a thing. I got to the point where I could actually be calmer and have more like a discussion or a block to the fear energy with the shadow beings. And kind of simultaneously, while all that was going on, I was learning from the other. I mean, I always just called them the others because angels, guides, ascended masters, all of this type of stuff, it wasn't a part of my experience. Like, I had a different way of classifying them completely. Um, to me, they always felt like the ones who work here and the ones who don't, because you'll get the ones that have the very pleasant company lines, you know what I mean? All is well, everything's, that sort of a vibe. Is like if you went into Target and it's like, "Welcome to Target, how can I help you?" They have that very, the ones who work here have that very kind of pleasant pleasantries and that kind of thing. And then you'd run into the rogues, or the ones that don't work here. And some of them will just be like, "I don't want anything to do with you," and run away, or they'll talk to you and start telling you things that are kind of outside what the standard company lines are. And so again, I never saw it as angels and guides or spirits or anything like that. I always just called them the others, because for a long time, to my perspective, it was whoever it was that was inside my head that wasn't me. Um, and I got to learn a lot from them about how to control my astral states, how to control my energy, how to move through the fear and out the other side of it to release that kind of a vibration. How to step into different portals. Like they would tell me things like, any of the mirrors are step throughable, right? And so as it turned out, any of the, like when I was meditating, I would get like images or flashes of places and things happening. And sometimes the energy would be stronger pulling towards me in one than the other. And I found that I could step through that right into the experience. And so I was learning a lot about how to operate and work in this kind of a state of consciousness. At the same time where I was kind of learning how to back off of the fear and how to deal with the shadow people. And I remember specifically one night I had been fed up with the shadow people, and there was one in the room, and it was, trying to scare me, and I was just like, look, how long are we going to do this? And I asked, were you ever human? Like, are you like me? Are you something like me, or are you something else completely? And I remember getting the overwhelming feeling of sadness, of pain and loneliness in that moment.
Huh.
It like curled up and rolled away from me, and just that question had hurt its feelings. And in that moment, I sort of realized that this is a formerly human construct.
Yeah.
Right. Like I've interacted with things that came from places that aren't physical reality, and their emotional set, it doesn't work that way. Like that feeling of despair, loneliness, sadness. There was a rejection. Like he was no longer recognizable as human to another human. And that was, it hurt. It hurt that entity for me to say that. And I realized, I think that many of them are personality constructs that once they transitioned, there was still a lot of fear and stuff happening for them, and they couldn't quite connect to the light, or whatever you want to call it, heaven, the others, angels, that those who help you move on from this world, because the vibe was just so off, and a lot of them are just stuck and lost. I spoke to another one, this was not even that long ago, and I asked from his perspective, like, is this hell? And he said yes, except you can leave for some reason. So from his perspective of my astral projection, of my astral state into that realm, was that for whatever reason I can come and go from hell. And
Which makes sense. I mean, because I was actually going to ask this at some point, but now is a good time as any.
mm,
How many dimensions do you know you travel to over the years?
I don't necessarily put a number on it or count or make that distinction in the way some people do. It just doesn't match my experience data, if that makes sense. Because I
It
think,
does, yeah.
yeah, a lot of it is, so it's not like you move into another dimension and it has a sign that says, welcome to this dimension. It's,
From the
I,
one from the one other person I talked to who was a lucid dreamer slash astral projectionist,
mhm,
he his name is Vincent Field. He wrote a book about it called Astral Projection and Lucid Dreaming.
mhm,
Very easy to find title. But he he was able to count basically because each dimension had different types of creatures. He said that's how he was able to tell.
mhm. Yeah,
So I
and it
mean,
it has a
I don't
different
know.
kind of, how do I say, like an experience texture. I'm still trying to figure out how to put words on the, it's like you do have certain differences in the way experience happens in different levels of reality. Like there's some that, sort of mimic this experience in that you're like once you first get out of your body, you're basically you're in a vibrational state experiencing the physical realm still. So you're still within the physical sphere, but you're in a vibrational state, which is where a lot of astral travelers take place. They hop around in the physical world in a astral state. And then there's like a way, how do I say this, of dissemination, right? The more disseminated you become as a consciousness, the different kind of spheres and textures of reality you can move into. But you sort of have to match anytime you're moving into a different uh dimension, I guess, you sort of have to match that dimension's physics, if
Makes
that
sense.
makes sense. So we have our set of physical physics, that the laws that sort of rule over how things work here, but they're not all the same in all different dimensions. So you sort of have to be able to match what's happening in other dimensions in order to move into that dimension. And there are definitely ones that I've encountered where the experience, the rules there are so different that my human perspective isn't making much sense out of them.
Yeah.
Right? I'm having for me, in order to bring experience, like energetic experience, back into something understandable, I have to translate it into some sort of visual or some sort of sensation, because my human construct doesn't have any other way of understanding the information. But I've definitely been in spheres of experience where it's so um not like human experience that I'm having trouble making sense out of what I'm witnessing or what I'm perceiving. It's almost like there's places where emotions are experienced more like colors or like visuals, something more like what people talk about with aura. There's
Yeah.
so and you can tell when you're somewhere where you don't mesh or you don't quite belong, because it's almost just very confusing and difficult to understand what's going on there. And if you come across a personality operating from there, the communication becomes weirder and different. Sometimes you get images, sometimes it's just an emotional impressions that you get. Sometimes the visuals that kind of create themselves around what you're experiencing don't make a lot of sense. I remember once being shot. I ended up clear off of Earth, clear out through space. I remember like planets, solar systems shooting past me. And what I ended up in was something that looked like the background of a large red sun and the silhouette of I guess creature is a word for it, standing against it. But it was like I was having trouble understanding what I was looking at. It something more like a large kiwi bird with like long spindly legs and arms, and it was nothing that I had any point of reference for. And that was an awkward exchange, and I actually got like smacked back into my bed and then bounced right back out into a construct in the void space. So it was like a just a plain square room that was hovering in a black void. There is like transition spaces. It's like a neutral meeting space, basically.
Well, actually, we actually have a question.
Yeah.
One of my most faithful watchers, Canadian Spirit. Catherine, would you say that your sensory input seems to get inverted when traveling?
Um, can you clarify the question a little bit?
I mean, I
Like,
would,
what do we mean exactly by sensory input? Like, definitely, when you're out of your body or operating in other spheres of reality, the communication is all largely impressions, or uh, you get psychic impressions and then create an image out of what you're experiencing. And I hopefully that's hopefully that
he,
was the question that was being asked.
they, they said meaning sight or other senses is almost like it doesn't come from a physical organ.
Yeah,
Like you could,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You're getting your communication as a psychic impression. You're getting the energy of the situation, and then in order for the mind to make sense of it, it's kind of constructing a picture or constructing something to represent that visually so that it's understandable to the consciousness. Similarly to how things operate when you're dreaming, like your eyes aren't actually seeing anything, there's nothing physical happening. You're the energy of what's happening, the communication that's what's happening is turning into images for purposes of communication and understanding. So yeah, absolutely.
which makes sense. I mean, it makes sense. I talked to a lot. I mean, I've talked to a lot of people on the show, and a lot of
Hmm.
them say that when we fully evolve spiritually, when we fully spiritually awaken, that we will move beyond the point where we need bodies, and it would make sense to not need bodies to get sensory input to that point. That we would be able to just feel things through our mind. We'd be able to see through our mind, be able to hear through our mind.
Yeah. And honestly, we do that all of the time anyway. Like all of our senses, our physical senses, our organs are receiving stimulus and translating them into pictures that we can understand and operate in. So that's sort of already the way the system works. It's just doing it with a kind of stimulus that's a psychic stimulus or an energy stimulus rather than the physical stimulus of like light hitting objects and creating images out of that. A good example of it is you know, not too long ago, I think it was probably several months ago at this point, but I was doing an out of body experience and I was in my bedroom and there was a personality in my doorway. And when I looked at him, I greeted him, calmly, and it started communicating with me. And what it said was, I think we should be careful and quiet because of that very tired one over there, and pointed back at my body on the bed. And I kind of laughed and said, you don't need to worry about her. She won't wake unless you give her reason to. Um, but the personality that I was interacting with in my doorway, what it looked like to me physically, like the image that I was constructing was kind of a scrawny, weak little body, a humanoid form with with big eyes and a big head, sort of sitting there glowing in my doorway. So that image, that construct looks very much like what people describe as grays or aliens, right? But the
It
energy
kind of, yeah.
translation is, I'm witnessing a personality that is close enough to a human construct that it's capable of the same kinds of thought processes that I am, but it's not a physical being. So it's a very scrawny, weak looking little body. And it comes from a different dimension of understanding. So it sees things in a broader view and has the capacity to interpret broader perspective understanding. So it looks like it has bigger eyes and a bigger head. So based on the energy I'm interacting with in a non-physical space, my mind has constructed an image out of the best it can, out of the sense input that it's getting. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I mean, I don't know. These entities you're talking about, they kind
Mhm.
of remind me. I don't know how much of a gamer you are, or if your husband is, or whatever. But they kind of remind me of the nobodies from Kingdom Hearts series. Like that's what they kind of like the images I'm like thinking of. That's what I'm kind of seeing. I mean, bigger versions of them, kind of, but still, that's kind of what I'm seeing. And I mean, they kind of look like shadow people in a way, but it's just it's. Do you ever do you ever see different looking creatures when you're traveling? Like, do you ever see things that are not like shadow beings? But I mean, well, besides the big bird you told us about, but you ever see do you ever see any alien forms that are more known?
Yeah, well, I mean, like I said, the one that was standing in my doorway looked very much like what people generally consider grays. And aside from it all depends on the degree to which you're able to process the sensory data that's coming into you. Like a lot of the shadow people have forms themselves It's just that there's a lack of sense data input. Like you're getting a shadow not because they are a shadow, but because we're not interpreting all of the data that's there. So a lot of things will look like a shadowy form or a shadow figure, at least at first. A lot of the time when you're interacting, at least with the ones who work here, quote unquote, what you'll get is whatever image or impression they're getting off you that you need to see. And I didn't realize that until I started doing it. One of the things I was taught how to do is psychopomp work, or how to help humans who are transitioning, who are going through their death experience, to cross over and get into the light or get closer to a vibration where they can be picked up by the others and moved on. And one of the interesting things I noticed when I was doing that kind of work is when I was interacting with a human, it was like I would get the psychic impression of feelings, memories, thoughts. Like I had one individual where I was seeing like from myself watching over him as a child, and him sitting there playing with like a little whack-a-drum thing, and all of this psychic data that came through him to me. And then when he looked up at me, he said, "Oh, it's you." And I just said, "Yeah, I used to watch you when you were a child. You remember," and produced the little drum and handed it to him. And he was like, "Oh, right." And I was like, "All right, well, I think you need to come with me and we need to go this way." And so I walked him down the hallway, the tunnel, or at least to me, it looked like a kind of a hallway. I'm not sure what it looked like to him, but walked him down that direction and delivered him to the place at the end of it, which is where I turn back. I don't go in there, but I've delivered people in there. And so I
I
think
I
yeah.
actually I actually had a guest on a couple weeks ago who was an ER. She's an ER nurse,
Mhm.
and she can see spirits and talk to them. So she actually does that on a regular basis. When someone dies in the ER, she walks them to the light, wherever it may be for them. But she kind of like walks them out the door of the hospital, or at least out the door of the hospital, so they're out of the hospital and they're not haunting the hospital. But
Yeah.
I mean, and Canadian Spirit actually said, to build on Jeremy's question, do you ever see animal-like spirits?
Animal spirits? Yeah, animals, well, animals absolutely have spirits, and I don't interact with too many of them here on my plane, except for my own. I had a cat that was very dear to me that I had for 16 years, who made her transition back to spirit. And she, if I'm sitting there meditating and I call to her like I always did, she still comes. Um and I have had animals. Sometimes you do get animal spirits that show up as guides, or as messages. How do I say this well? Depending on what kind of form the animal takes, what kind of animal spirit you're working with in a dream state or in an astral state, and especially what kinds of emotions and feelings that you're getting off of it, there can be messages or important information in that communication if they show up. I'm assuming in a dream state. I have had things like wolves show up to follow and go along with. So usually they're guiding into one of the portals, or into one of the realities, somewhere where I'm being called to. If I'm being obtuse and not paying attention to where I'm supposed to go, basically, sometimes guides will show up in the form of animals. But we seem to have lost our host momentarily. Hopefully, everybody is enjoying the conversation. I know I certainly spent many years like experiencing all of these things, but very confused about what any of it meant. So it was like collecting a bunch of experiences and trying to sort through how to make sense out of any of it without any kind of spiritual background.
I apologize for that. Fatherhood sometimes gets in the way of podcasting, but
You're all right. I just started chatting without you, so
I heard it all. It was actually very enlightening. So,
okay.
but the question I've actually been wanting to ask you for a while now.
Mhm.
Do you see other travelers when you're out there? Do you see other people like you who are exploring?
Um, here's the here's the thing is that we're all travelers. It's just some people are more aware of it than other people are. Um, your dream states are all a form of traveling. And I remember being very upset the first time I was interacting with other humans in their dream states. The first time I realized that, oh, this is another physically focused human who's dreaming. Like they're in their dream consciousness state. And so for me, recognizing that dreams weren't actually taking place inside our heads, like it wasn't just some neural misfiring, like there was a sandbox reality happening on that conscious level, was really upsetting to me at first. um but the bottom line is that all people are astral travelers. They're spirit first, they're a personality construct first that is experiencing through physical reality. Like physical reality is a technique of experience, but it's not the only experience we have. And so, have I come across other humans out that, like, yeah, definitely I have. It's just that most of them are not aware that that's what they're doing. In
I mean,
fact, the one time I tried to tell a guy that that's what he was doing, he kind of freaked out on me. The others thought that was funny. That was me learning my lessons, right? Like a lot of people are not really ready for that knowledge. And so when I was working with a guy in his dream, and he started to panic and freak out, and I was like, no, 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 listen, this is a dream. Like we run these scenarios, this is the way the energy is moving for you, these events unfolding. And so the reason that we work through these scenarios ahead of time is so that you can make a different choice, but you don't need to panic right now. This is just a dream state. And he flipped out completely on me. um and I sort of, I guess, I mean, because it started so young for me and I was so used to it, I didn't realize how upsetting that would be for other people just to suddenly, I forgot myself. I forgot how frightening and weird it is when somebody just starts talking to you in your dreams and treating it like it's real. Like, so he panicked and freaked out, and my coaches, my guides thought that was pretty funny. Like there's a
I'm
reason
sure.
we don't come out and tell all people. There's a reason why. Because a lot of people, it's not for them to know that. It's their ego consciousness doesn't handle it well at first.
Kind of hazing the new guy in a way.
Yeah, I will. I try not to be upsetting, but when you're new to learning anything, you make mistakes, and I could write a book full of my
Oh, it
mistakes.
happens. It happens.
So I scared that poor fellow.
Now, do you do you ever actually like kind of do? Well, I hate to ask it this way, but do you ever kind of time travel when you're traveling?
Yeah, absolutely. Time is, let's see, there is a progression of events. Like there is an expansion or a more that happens. But we experience time in a linear format. That's a product of physical reality. And it's necessary here in physical reality. In fact, when people start experiencing time outside of the linear format, I mean, we call that a disease. We call that Alzheimer's. When you can't keep track of where you are in time anymore, it's very disruptive and unhelpful for physical reality, right? But again, if you know where your tuner is, like just because there is an expansion of everything that's happening, we don't necessarily have to experience it in a linear format from an astral state. And oftentimes when I'm pulled into a different time or a different experience of time, it's usually because the spirit or the personality that I'm interacting with is wanting to show me something about their experience or what happened in their lifetime. So that's sort of I usually call it embodiment projection because it's a little different than just astral projection because it's almost like going into their experience as if I was them. And so you
Yeah.
can experience, different times, different people's lives. Usually what they're trying to show you is their death experience or some portion of their experience that's still problematic or upsetting to them. So, and then sometimes it's just like one time I was just sitting on the couch watching TV and suddenly I was uh sitting I was standing on a porch, like a wraparound porch, looking out my porch, and there was, a wind chime in the tall grass that was it not really a lawn, it was dry and overgrown, but there was a dirt road out front, and there was a lady in a yellow dress walking her dog down the street. And as I was looking, just the feeling I got from what I was interacting with, I was like, all right, what do you need to tell me about this? Like, where is she? What did you do to her? Somebody was trying to communicate something with me about sometimes it's the situation, something that's upsetting them about their life experience that they're trying to communicate with me. But yeah, you can end up experiencing all kinds of different points in time.
Did did you get an answer for that one? Was that like a unsolved crime or something possibly?
Probably. But sometimes it can be hard to sift through or get the data that you need out of it. I got Route 7 and the images of an old hotel that was a two-story, one of those old two-story hotels where the walkway is on the outside of it. So it was like a motel on the side of a
Like
Route 7.
like in New Orleans, kind of. Yeah. That's
Yeah,
like
or
first person picture. Yeah.
Texas or Ohio or anywhere. So some part of some of the problem with getting enough specific data out of it in order to be able to do anything with it. You know, um, and
Imagine if
that
someone built. I know it's going to sound sci-fi almost, but imagine if someone actually built a device that could help people who do this, and like a watch they wear, something that like actually will like transfer over when they go to their out of their body, and like it actually like tells you that where you are. That'd be amazing.
Yeah, they're working on a technology that actually it's for like sleep and for like coma patients and stuff that actually will read the brain patterns and produce images out of it. So they're kind of working on the technology of how to actually make dreams visible on a monitor. And it's a real early forms of doing this
It's
yet. I mean, the images that they're getting are more like shadowy and they're not real well filled in. There's not a lot of detail to it
it,
at this time.
it sounds like someone's trying to make Minority Report become a real thing.
Yeah, I don't know, but a technology like that might be able to be used to at the very least wherever like someone like me wherever I'm going to produce images out of it. Um Which, I mean, imagine, like, being able to use consciousness someday as like a camera to look into other dimensions and pull information out of it, using consciousness like a Hubble telescope into places where we can't see physically. It's an
I
interesting
could.
thought.
I somehow I don't know if the other species out there would let us do that. I don't think they would like us being able to do that.
Yeah, I definitely get the impression that it's our consciousness is not well suited to all spheres of reality, and it's not our fault or anything. Like it's just a product of being physically focused as a human. We face things here that they don't face in non-corporeal reality. Pain, hunger, cold. Fear is a very physical emotion, a very physically focused vibration. Like the kinds of things that we have to fear here, like physical harm, like the fear of death, all of that sort of thing is not necessarily a concern for beings that are non-corporeal to begin with. They don't have vibrations like that, basically. And so in my experience, when you're interacting with something that doesn't have its human street cred, like it's not a spirit, it's not an ascended master, it's not something that was ever manifested here, its origin is somewhere non-physical to begin with. Um, that energy of fear or anger, those kinds of responses, it's very uncomfortable to them. It's imagine somebody screaming in your face with this potent energy, like it's of rejection. Basically, it's not very compatible to all spheres of reality. So if you were going to do that, I would suggest using people who are more used to communicating in those spheres of reality.
Yeah, I mean, well, I mean, it all goes back to the fact that they say we use less than 10% of our brains. So who knows in the future if we actually can unlock other parts of our brain and figure out how to use them, if we're able to do this type of traveling without actually fully understand what's going on, because we
Yeah.
unlocked abilities that we were supposed to have, whether we evolved to have them or whether they were given to us by extraterrestrials. That's all debatable, but we can spend all night here debating that fact. But it's
Yeah. And there's a lot of theories out there. I love Ancient Aliens. I watch it all the time. Um, and definitely there's a lot, there's a lot of ideas out there, and I even have my own ideas. And I think that, anybody who tries to tell you that they know for sure what's going on with any of this is trying to sell you their book or
oh god, yeah.
their website. Or the fact of the matter is that we really just don't know. And I think that we're at a point, though, a precipice where more people are starting to look at it like there's more going on. Like, even
Yeah.
science is like, with string theory, like there's other dimensions, and they're starting to look into the fact that like dark matter and dark energy, there's just a lot happening out there that we still don't know what it is or how it works.
I mean, they're trying to do something over there with CERN. I don't know what they're trying to do, but it's not going to be a good thing, I don't think. I really don't think it's going to be a good thing by any means. But the government should not mess with these type of things. Just saying. Didn't they learn from the Montauk Project and from freaking every other project they ever done
I
that failed horribly?
I certainly get the impression from the others that humanity, how do I, and it's never delivered in a negative or nasty way, but I get the impression that we are cleverer than we are wise. So we're sort of like kids who stick forks in electrical sockets, you
We're clever
know.
monkeys. We're clever monkeys who figured out how to walk on two legs. That's basically about as far as we got.
Yeah, we're cleverer than we are wise. We haven't figured out how to pace ourselves or use discretion in what it is that we're playing with and doing. And a lot of that is that we don't understand what the consequences or repercussions can be for what we're doing. Just like a kid who's sticking the fork in the electrical socket, right? Like, it just seems like an explorative thing, and they're not really understanding that there's a danger there. So
Which
we're
yeah, I mean I mean it's 100% right. And unlike the kid, we're not gonna learn after the first time doing it that we shouldn't do it. I mean, we're gonna keep trying and trying because we're relentless and things like that. When we discover something new, we keep trying to find ways to get there and conquer. I mean, look what we did to America when the Europeans found it finally. I'm not gonna say they found it first, but when they found it finally, look what they kept trying to do. They kept trying to find different ways to get over here and to conquer. And it's just it's our human nature, unfortunately. Unfortunately for a lot of us, it's human nature to conquer things we don't quite understand yet or things that are new to us. And because manifest destiny, we have to conquer everything we see. Like it's just inbred in our brains almost.
I certainly think that we operate from a lack mentality mindset, right? Like, there's not enough for everyone, so I'm going to take what I can, and because I can, I should, which is not not the best thought process.
It's not. I mean, we need to have the spiritual awakening happen first. The great spiritual awakening that's supposed to happen in the future. I've heard many years. I've heard many numbers of years that from now that's supposed to happen. They always vary. No one has the same answer usually, except well, a couple people have, but not a lot of people agree it started in 2012 and that it's just been moving forward. but they don't. No one has like an endpoint yet where it's going to actually be done, completed, and we're all going to be able to be better people because of it. We're all going to be able to be better humans because of it and a better species. But no one really has that endpoint yet, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, more and more people are realizing things, right? And it's interesting to view humanity like the entire physical system is set up to give and receive, right? Like all things play a part in what they take, they give back something else that something else uses. As there's like a circle of life or a symbiotic relationship happening with most of the natural world. And humanity has got to figure out its place in the symbiotic relationship, right? Because so far we take everything that we interact with and take what we want from it, take anything we can use, anything we think is neato, anything that's, a resource that we can use. And where is our give back? Like, what kind of symbiotic benefit are we producing for the system? Would be my question. Like,
It's
oftentimes we don't even, we cremate or bury our bodies in body. Like, we're not even giving our bodies back to the system. Like, what are we returning to the system, to the symbiotic system here? And it
we're
would be,
not.
yeah, I think it would be wise for us to start to consider, like, how do we fit into the picture a little bit better?
Yeah, I mean, it's true. I mean, we are not. We we don't know how to give back. We just know how to take because it's our mindset. It's mine is our mindset when we see something we want, and not, oh, maybe I can get some of this if I talk to the person who is here, the person or being that's here. Maybe I can get some of this and take it back and study it. No, I'm just gonna take it. I'm just gonna take it all and screw that person. There's a reason that these beings you see. There's a reason these all the ultra terrestrials, all the extraterrestrials don't want to embrace us fully because they know how we are and they know our behavior patterns and they know that we should not be welcomed anywhere. We shouldn't be welcomed anywhere. We're not invited to the dinner table yet because of this, because we are still a backwards dirtball planet that is far from being to the level a lot of the other planets out there have been because they've been around and active for a lot longer than we have.
Yeah, but the impression that I get from it is those who are spiritually connected, who can, it is like, you know, when you have a child and they try to stick a fork in the electrical socket, you stop them and explain why that's bad. You know what I mean? Or why that would not be good. And maybe you put a cover in the electrical socket in
It,
the meantime
it,
until the child's old enough
it,
to understand that. So,
if you're
um,
lucky, if you're lucky, one of my I actually kind of almost watched one of my parents' good friends' daughter do that when we were kids. Like, and like I was older and I wasn't in the room at the time exactly to see it, but I was there like the second after it happened, and I was like, why would you do that? Like that can't. I'm like, that's metal. Metal and electricity do not mix. Like that's not a good idea. Don't do that. Like it. I mean, yeah,
yeah.
it's like a lot of things when you're a kid. You don't touch the oven when it's hot. Like that's something that every kid. I learned that lesson when I was a kid after touching the oven while it's hot and realizing like don't do that.
Mhm.
Like you're gonna get burned. And
And
uh,
some things that are really detrimental, they, step in and try to tell us no, or at least for the people who can hear or experience it. So I think the kind of, as to your point, like the awakening that people are going through is the proliferation of meditation, the proliferation of spiritual practices, the many people returning to a private practice, like a personal relationship, rather than having a dogma or religion tell them what to think. And so I think the more people who get these kinds of messages through and are connecting on their individual level, and we're all hearing kind of the same things, right? That's how an awakening for everyone happens. So like the work you're doing, sitting here talking about it live, talking about it with people, posting stuff, all of that helps kind of spread the information out there so that more and more people can connect and hear for themselves. We're
exactly, exactly. It's funny. I was just talking to a spirit medium on Monday,
Mhm.
What the fuck's his name? Joseph, something Joseph, Daniel Joseph. And he actually told me because he talks to spirits, he talks to extraterrestrials, he's talked to God 8 times, he says.
Mhm.
But whether you believe him or not, I don't know which way I really fall on that. But as everybody in the show listens to this show knows, I am very against organized religion, but I do believe there could be possibilities of things out there. But he actually said to me, he's like, you have lived 28 times. He's like, this is your 28th go around on this planet. And he's like, he's like, this might be the last one though, because he's like, you're doing what you're supposed to be doing with this podcast. You're getting other people's messages out there to the world, and you're helping spread awareness. And I hope he's right. I hope I finally found my purpose on this earth. But 28 times, damn, I've been around for a long time apparently, and kind of makes me question who my past life for. I gotta get that done one day. I really do. But I
Yeah.
mean, it's just we all have to find our purpose on this planet. And I don't know if you believe in reincarnation, because I know being brought up agnostic, you might not. But we're experiencing what you're experiencing now. Maybe you do a little bit. Well, actually, yeah. What do you believe about reincarnation? It's always a question I like to ask. I pretty much already guessed.
Based on my experiences, reincarnation is an absolute yes. Like
Okay. Well,
people people come back many times in many different forms in order to experience things from as many different angles as they feel like they need to get where they're trying to go. So this physical reality has a lot of I know a lot of religions and a lot of thought processes and things out there say that we come here until we're good enough to move on and go back to something better, but this is a really the physical reality experience provides a lot of growth and learning that a lot of other realms just don't. And so it's a really valuable experience every time you incarnate and come here, you experience something different and grow in ways that just aren't possible on other planes. So it's a very valuable experience that we get here for sure.
it is, and I personally, I don't like the idea of we have to be good before we can move on. I believe there is somewhere to move on to. I think it's another dimension,
Mhm,
and I think it's where we came from initially. But I think, I hate the term heaven. I freaking hate it with a passion. But
mhm.
I don't think it's that. I just think it's another place that is more of a home to our spirit. And I think, in my personal opinion, it's not that we got to be good enough to get there. I think we all have goals. I think we have something we have to accomplish on this planet or on whatever planet we end up on in that life. And if we actually accomplish it, then great, we get to move on. If we don't, then well, one more ride in the merry-go-round won't kill us.
Yeah. Or maybe we've built upon the experience, but now we're interested in something else, and want to come back and learn it from another aspect or check out some different way of living, a different culture, a different experience to have. There's a lot of different reasons, I think, why souls incarnate to increase their XP points, if you will. And it's all to the benefit and the growth of the spiritual experience. And we definitely
Yeah,
have a breaking away from some of the more controlling spiritual thought processes that have been in the past to give people a little bit more freedom to explore themselves and a connection with home.
I yeah, that I will say that's the one thing that's been debated is whether or not it's a choice, whether or not reincarnation is a choice, or whether or not it's kind of forced upon us by something or someone.
Mhm.
That's been debated for a long time, and it's going to continue to be debated because no one really, none of us are going to have an answer. And if we do, it's because we moved on past this plane and we're not coming back, and we got to learn everything. We got to learn everything that's out there, and we're out in that dimension learning things now, maybe. But couldn't tell you. I haven't been there, so I don't know. But
Yeah,
before
and
we,
I
but
can't speak on it for sure either, except that I've
I don't think anybody ever can get in the show can really speak on it. And if they say they can, I don't know if I believe them.
right, that's what I said. Is anybody who tells you they know for sure is trying to sell you their book. It
Exactly, exactly. But well, before we wrap up for the night, please tell my audience about your podcast, because I actually didn't realize you were a podcaster because I didn't see that in your profile. So please go ahead and tell my audience about your podcast a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a small YouTube channel called Vibrational U it's like a U, like a university, because I think we're all here learning about our frequencies and our vibration and how to have a better human experience overall. And I do a podcast on there called Spirituality, with a TEA, and it's just real talk from longtime spiritual practitioners about their journeys and what they think is actually going on with reality based on their experiences. It's a safe place for people to talk outside of the dogma thought processes about what they really think is going on with things. So
And where can they find these? Well, where can they find you if they want to reach out to you for any of the services you do offer? Because I know you do offer some. And then where can they find the podcast if they want to find it?
right now, I'm exclusively on YouTube. I have Vibrational You, and I have another one called Unraveling the Unexplained, which is a React channel. My brother takes like supernatural videos he's found and has me speak on what I think is actually going on in them. So it's just a React channel. I don't actually have products and services that I offer. I am not financially gaining from any of any of this at this time. I think it's just important to talk about things. So
Well, that's even more admirable. So I actually respect the shit out of that. Because
you can always watch the videos. You can always comment on the videos and reach out to me that way. I have an Instagram, Gillett.Kate on Instagram that you can check out as well. But yeah, I'm not selling anything. Just speaking my truth and spreading things around as best I can.
I respect the shit out of that. And I mean, as someone who's not really making much off this, a little bit here and there from being smart about how I do things. But other than that, yeah, I'm not selling anything. Though Paranormal the New Normal shirts and hats coming soon. No, I'm kidding. I don't have the freaking time, or I don't have the time or freaking patience to do all that shit. If anybody wants to do it for me, be my guest. I'll take like 20% of the profits. Like, talk to me. Talk to me. We can work it out.
We could work on some merchandising.
We can work on merchandising if anybody actually likes my show enough to do that. 200 plus episodes. Come on, guys. You can merchandise shit out of this. I've said enough. I've said enough funny lines in this shit that you can make a couple shirts out of shit. But and if any of my listeners want to know where to find me, if you're new or if you haven't been around for a while, shame. What the fuck? But check the outro. It's all there, as always. And for all the watchers, it's on the bottom of the damn screen. Just read. But thank you all for watching. Thank you all for listening, as always. It's been my pleasure having you, Kat. It's freaking amazing conversation. I enjoyed the hell out of it. Learned a lot. So I like when I learn. When I learn, it's a good show.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Because when I learn, it's not someone just trying to sell their book.
Yeah.
But have a good night, everybody, and I will see you tomorrow, hopefully, if the guest shows up. But I'll see you tomorrow. Have a good night, everybody.